Welcome back, War Room fans. Here we go, the second part of the U.S. strategy session. This one is Rainbow 5. This is the historical U.S. battle plan that the U.S. came up with in the late 30s. Once they got the feeling of how the war was going to get, how the war was going to move along. That Nazi Germany and their Italian allies were on the rise, and so they formulated battle plans to aid England and France in stopping the Axis powers. So I'm sure most of you have watched the other battle plan, War Plan Orange, which was the U.S.'s kill Japan first strategy. And after they scrapped that, they went with Rainbow 5 to go after Germany primarily because of political interests, that they needed to secure the United Kingdom, make sure that the British homeland didn't fall. Plus they felt in, the United States, they felt that Germany was a greater threat to the United States and its allies than Japan was. So, historically, I'm going to kind of keep it in the vein of the last U.S. video. The historical Rainbow 5 plan was basically this. The United States, when they first entered the war, their primary concern was defense of England. Shore up England. And then once they got England to a point where they felt they were secure from German aggression, then that's when the plan was to basically put as much pressure on the western side of Germany, and eventually it led down to Italy, to help alleviate the Russian front. Now, while this was going on, the U.S. didn't ignore the Pacific, but if you look at the timeline of World War II, yes, the United States was fighting battles in the Pacific. Some of their biggest victories, like Midway, happened early in the war. But there's a big gap in the United States Pacific timeline that they didn't really get going until the end of 43 and the beginning of 44 in the Pacific. And that was because they pretty much devoted all of 42 and pretty much almost all of 43 into this containment plan that they had come up with Rainbow 5. And that containment plan was secure England, take back the African regions, have a presence down here, threaten Italy, which was Germany's Achilles heel, so to speak, because Italy could not stop England and the United States from attacking it without German help. And then in 44 was when the U.S. really kind of took off. Obviously, in the European theater, we have the Normandy invasion in June, but also over on the Pacific map, that's really when they really started taking territories. It seemed like every month or so there was a big battle on an island, moving closer and closer to Japan, eventually culminating in the Philippines falling in November of 44. They took the Marianas in early 44, and slowly that was the big moment when the United States kind of exerted its true might. But the history lesson, though, for War Room is that took many turns in War Room. If we're going to talk War Room, the game, that doesn't mean the United States is showing up on turn 3 and kicking butt. The United States, to truly realize its potential in this game, they, kind of like in the real war, they're not going to be kicking down doors until at least turn 4 to 6. And even then, you're gonna have to really be cautious on your approach to how you're gonna run this war, because the United States can get strung out real quick, meaning the United States has to cross these vast oceans to get reinforcements up. And so if you get a little bit too eager in your aggression, then what's going to happen is you're going to like sever your chain of guys moving over, and then you'll start creating gaps in your advancement, meaning any troops that are doing offensive operations over here might not be able to be reinforced for a turn or two because you weren't, slowly bringing guys over every turn, the reinforcements, the slow buildup, until you can get it to the point where you can really take it to them, okay? Now, one of the things I have found in playing the United States is the United States is set up on this map to basically do Rainbow 5. It's just the way the sea zones work, how the United States moves its troops overseas. And we're going to talk about that because I think that's a big part of the United States early in the war, in the first couple turns. And what I mean by that is you basically have 3 options for these initial units on the board. And what I mean by that is let's take the first turn, okay? And let's say we've consulted with our British ally here, and we are going to do the London calling, which we reviewed on the British video, which means our focus on the opening turns is to get as much stuff into that England area, into B1 itself, or A6, A7. So on the opening turn, the US is going to send the first to the A2 zone. You're going to fly the 11th out here, which will be able to land in B1, okay, on its rebase. The 12th is going to come out, and they're going to land up here and form up. So they're going into B1 at the end of turn 1. Okay. Now, so this is the first path you can take. You bring these guys up into Eastern Canada, which means on turn 2, they can jump off to the A7, A3 zone. Okay. Now, if we're doing the defense of England plan, we're going to stick with the traditional Rainbow 5 plan. If Britain's doing the same thing, they've already brought the Canadians out to A7 on the opening turn. So then on the second turn, you bring these guys down, you bring the first into A7 to cover them, and these guys are already in B1, okay? So now with your guys sitting in A7 on turn 2, now you've presented, you have options when you're in the A7 zone. It's a very nice zone in the sense that the Axis don't know where you're going. You can go the northern route. You could even jump all the way up to A4 from A7, okay? But we're gonna ignore the Russian thing for right now when we're just talking Rainbow 5. So when on turn 2 you're sitting here in A7, the traditional approach that the United States took is they came down here to help the British in Africa. Also, in war room terms, it's not a bad thing for the United States to get 2 extra oil, an extra iron, and an extra OSR. So there's some nice juicy resources down there. Okay? So that's the traditional path. Collect these resources, knock Germany off, And now you actually have, with your initial units, you have enough force to press that issue. Okay? And then once again, it's that delay I was talking about. Once you start doing this, there's a gap because we've basically brought over all our units. Now, never forget, we still have the 82nd up here. So we have, we got in here, we've got 3, 5, that's 8. So we got 10 land units plus the British. Okay. That isn't a bad battle plan. Just do the traditional route with America. Now, the other option is you can jump up, and if you don't want to do the A7, you can go to A3 and threaten Norway and Finland on turn 3. Once again, it's not a bad option because you'll pick up 3 iron, which will hurt Germany. And, you've taken these territories up here, you've secured the Scandinavia region. Once again, I'm not too concerned about the US going in here, but you're really taking it to Germany here. I personally believe, though, that the United States, you have to choose one or the other. The U.S. can't do both. And whichever direction the U.S. goes, you need to convince the British to do the other direction. So if the U.S. says, okay, we'll commit to the Mediterranean, then the British focus in on Norway and Finland. That way you can have both powers kind of coming at the edges of them and consuming a lot of their resources. Plus, it's very difficult for Germany to defend that. Once you get ashore, it's going to be very difficult, okay? Now, once you get all your guys over here, you do want to try to consolidate them up into as big stacks as you can, because that will free up commands, so then you can start doing your island hopping war plan orange, okay? And we're still focused in on the Marianas, like we were if you're gonna do the true war plan orange, go after Japan hot and heavy. That's always your goal, get to the Marianas. It's just that if you're doing this plan, that might not happen until turn like 6. But always keep your eyes on the Pacific map. You just don't want to stay static over there. You do want to keep moving your guys forward into position. Okay? Rainbow 5, even though it's a European-centered strategy, doesn't mean you ignore what's going on over here. You want to keep moving guys forward, keeping the pressure on them, maybe taking the Gilbert or Wake from them, just to get an air base up there, plus then you get a land base on P12 for that Marianas attack, okay? Now, one of the things also about the Rainbow 5 plan on what you're gonna do is these 2 units are kind of in the middle of everything. You can keep them. I mean, this is 5 units. You got 3 fighters and a bomber. Okay. On that opening turn, you could move them to Eastern Canada on the rail line. So you basically commit all your continental troops to Europe. You do have, enough air power at the beginning on the Pacific map if you be cautious with them. You could maybe even risk sending the 13th out here and then rebasing to Iceland on the opening turn, okay? That's up to you, because these troops really, you know, these two stacks can be used on either front, and it would obviously help whichever side you send them to. But if we're gonna do a Rainbow 5 strategy, I would recommend sending the 69th up here and sending them over with the 51st on that second turn. That way you just got another big stack of land units, and you got even more air power to help cover up here in Britain, okay? Now, obviously, there is going to be no land reinforcements going on the Pacific map for many turns under this. Because once you start building your units, the majority of them are going into the eastern United States. And the one thing about building, I'll talk about in the United States, is you don't want to, it's very similar to England. You don't want to get monolithic on your builds, like I'm just going to build all Navy this turn or all air power this turn. You want to have an even spread of naval, couple air units, maybe 2 a turn, 1 here, a good mix of land. And even though your stacks, when you're purchasing them, aren't going to be big stacks, but remember, the United States is the one power that really relies on this slow buildup. Just keep building, you know, a good spread of units. And after 2 or 3 turns, when they're coming over, they're going to really start stacking up and making 8 stacks and really driving the axis crazy. The other thing is when I was talking about Britain, is once again, guys, remember, we're playing in the blind. We don't know what the Axis powers are going to do specifically when it comes to their Navy. If on the opening turn, Germany and Italy and Japan on the other side actually start building naval units, you have to respond in kind. You can't just let them build up Navy and you don't have naval units at sea. You have to build them. So I wouldn't even take the chance on that opening turn, well, let's just see what they do. You still build like maybe 1 or 2 naval units here, 1 or 2 naval units here, okay? You don't want to get caught behind the naval building game, because if the Axis do something crazy like, well, let's try to stop the United States at sea, and you're not building naval units, it's going to be really tough for you to get across the Atlantic or across the Pacific. Air power can only take you so far. Remember, guys, air power cannot protect land units at sea if they have a naval unit there. Okay, I take that back. It's if you have a sub protecting them and they have air, then your land units will be gone. So that's a different point, which I'll talk about in the naval segment that I'll do here. But the point is that air power is a very weak, it's a very weak cover for naval units. You really need naval units to fight the other guy's Navy. If you have your air power fighting their navies, you're going to come up short, because as I said in the previous U.S. video, surface ships have very large anti-air factors on them. If you get like these 2 battleships down here and these 2 cruisers, I mean, that's 12 anti-air just there. I mean, that's the equivalent of 4 fighters at sea. So as you can see, the naval power has very strong anti-air capability. So don't rely on air units trying to take on naval units by themselves, because the naval units will beat the air units in the long run. Okay. So let's say that's where we are at the end of turn 2. Okay. We moved everything over to Eastern Canada. Turn 2, we're here. Okay. One of the things I would recommend on the air units, this is just me, but you guys, you can do it however you want. I do like, though, to split these 4 air commands and make one air, or maybe 1 or 2 of them have like 2 strats in each one, and then maybe 1 fighter to cover them. Or you could just make a single monolithic 4 bomber stack, and then the rest are fighters. So you basically have a bomber stack and a fighter stack. Now, the weakness of that strategy, though, is obviously, you know, yes, you've consolidated them, so it makes it easier on your command board, but you don't have much flexibility at that point. You only have 2 air units, basically, 1 to strat bomb, 1 for fighters. So maybe mix them up, maybe even just keep them all like this. You don't have to write orders for them every turn, because at least they're a threat. Germany has to account for them. You have a lot of air power there, and if you have 4 air wings like we do here, with a strat bomber in each one, well, now Germany's really concerned because they don't know where you're going to go. That's the other thing about this, kind of be patient with it, guys, is I know we want to rush in, but let's just say, you know, this is what we have. We didn't consolidate anything. We just, you know, the only thing we consolidated was maybe the 27th formed up here to make an 8 stack. Okay. Well, if we wanted to move all these units, it's 1, 2, 3, 7, that's 8 commands sitting out there in England. So that means you only have 1 on the Pacific map, or you only have 1 move to bring reinforcements in, okay? So that's why I keep going on this. You kind of have to slow your roll a little bit here early in the game. You got to let the United States build up some reserve units and get them in the pipeline, so to speak, so that when these guys make their move down here, or if Germany, for some reason, you know, leaves this France thing open, you can get on shore and have reinforcements coming in, okay? So the other thing about the A7 zone is, and once again, we don't know what's going on with these subs lurking around. But let's just say the German player, he just gives the ghost up on these, and in the first 2 turns, they're dead or they're not here anymore. You could bring all of that stuff from A7, go through, don't come up short on A15, go right into M1. Okay, you're going to have to ask the British, and you're also going to have to, you know, once again, we're getting a little bit farther down the turn tree here. So we're getting into the realm of we have no idea really what's going on. But it's just the philosophy behind it. If we've been building naval units, we feel secure, the British and American fleet can come down to M1 with all those land units. On the next turn, they could either drop, well, they would drop probably 1 or 2 units in French Morocco, but then you could press the issue and go right into M2 with your Navy and a lot of land stacks and really put the pressure on Italy, okay? So that's one path of the Rainbow Five. Get the United States rallied up right here in A7, get everything in B1, analyze the situation, see what Germany's doing. Another opportunity, besides, you know, going to the south and then the British maybe coming off and invading up here into Norway, okay, is you move all these land stacks out here on turn 3, and you just start stacking A6 with land units, okay? Big pile of humanity there, okay? Now, what does that do for you? If you have all those land units in A6, now you can take Norway Denmark, Germany, and France. They're all in the attack zone. Now, on turn 4, that doesn't mean you actually invade. Maybe you wait another turn or two for more reinforcements to stack A6, because the more guys you get into A6, the more units Germany has to commit to Germany or France. Okay? They have to commit guys, because every turn you delay, if you get more guys coming in, remember on the British build strategy I was talking about, guys, don't ignore building up here. Even if you're just building 2 land units a turn, if we're talking turn 4, you might have 6 additional units. You get them out here. And then when you think the timing is right, then you make a big push. Maybe you take Norway with just a few units, depending on how much they got up there. Maybe if they go, well, we can't lose Germany, they basically bail on France. And then you send in some units, but don't send them all in. Send in maybe 3/4 of them, leave some of them out here as reserves, so that if Germany counterattacks with Italy, they can't kill all your land units. Plus, you're making them really have to fight for it. This whole France thing also, it really helps if the Allies can be down in here and really tying up Italy. So Italy, they just can't help defend France and Germany and their own home country. Okay? That's the main advantage of coming down in here, is that you basically force Italy to just defend Italy. They don't have the resources, the time, the inclination to sacrifice Italy just to pump, just to do a counterattack into France. So that's like the turn 3. If you forego sending these land units down here or up there, I still recommend then you just dump them in A6. Because remember, on future turns, from A6, you can still jump down to M1. You can still make these moves, but at least you've given Germany pause. Okay? Now, the thing about the air units is if you start trying the strat bombing campaign, I'm not saying don't do that. That's a very viable tactic for the Allies. The one thing you have to realize, though, is the minute you start committing a lot of your commands just doing air strat attacks, ground attacks up here, you're reducing how many offensive moves you can make. Because remember, you're going to have at least 2 or 3 moves to get guys out of the United States. You still want to have 2 or 3 moves over here in the Pacific. There might even be a turn where the U.S. player goes, on this turn, I really need like 6 moves on the Pacific map. And so that's going to grind this down. It's going to slow up what you're doing on the European front. So with that in mind, that's why these types of attacks down here are nice for America, because the U.S. doesn't have to expend a lot of commands to do these little easy attacks. They might only have to expend like 2 or 3 commands to do it. And so they're not having like a major offensive into France or Germany where you're sending everything in. You can just send like an 8 stack down here to French Morocco. An 8 stack down here is going to pretty much will romp in Africa. Okay, so there is some management of your command stacks, meaning, how you pace your attacks on both sides of the battle. You're over here and then over on the Pacific side, because you can only move 9 guys. One way of looking at it is when you're playing the United States, once you start getting reinforcements coming over here, you almost have to assume you're going to have at least, 1 command here, 1 command here, maybe a naval command, you might have some air commands. So, if you build up this, the United States, and then one turn you look over and go, holy cow, I mean, just for me to start moving the guys off the United States is going to take 6 commands. You need to manage that. So every turn, you're moving 1, 2, or 3 guys out, and slowly whatever's left, you're slowly building them up so that on the following turns, you can get them to go out. There's a lot of management of these commands. And even if you're consolidating them up into bigger stacks, so you don't have as many command stacks, you're still going to always run in that problem with the United States. It's basically one of the few countries in this game where once you get into like turn 4 or 5, the United States is pretty much the only country that's always going to be fighting with this, man, I wish I would have had 11 moves, or I needed 12 moves this turn. Even Germany, by turn 4 or 5, is going to get down to the point where they have everything pretty much well consolidated, and they can pretty much well do whatever they want to do on 9 commands. Same thing with basically everybody. Even Japan will get to a certain point where, I got 9 commands, but I really only need to move 6 guys this turn, and that's one of the problems with the United States, okay? So we're going to end Rainbow 5 on this idea that the battle plan that the United States came up with was get to A7, get to B1, secure England, and then analyze the map and decide where you're going to launch your first offensive. I recommend doing that with the United States and let UK worry about Norway, Finland. But you could flip it. You could have UK go down here and the United States come up here. I just don't think the US and the UK need to tag team it and both go into the same region, okay? You're wasting your strength and your commands and your firepower that you do have, okay? Now, the last thing I'll also point out is you don't necessarily have to do the Eastern Canada with the land naval to A2. You can accomplish the same goal by bringing off all the initial units to A12, okay? Once again, though, we are running across some subs down here, and we don't know what those guys are doing. They could hinder us a turn and try to lock us down, especially if they bring over these 3 subs here. Then all of a sudden, the U.S. is kind of stuck down in A12, staring down 5 subs with only 2, with a battleship and a cruiser, and that's not good. So that's why the conservative, let's keep the land units on the land until we make our move and get the Navy up in A2, okay? But the advantage of coming down here to A12 is on the second turn, you can still jump to A7, and on the second turn, you can jump all the way to A16. The only negative of being in A16 is there's only one option on a land invasion, and that's French Morocco, okay? So you're kind of telling them what you're doing. Now, sometimes that's not bad. Sometimes letting the Axis know what's coming might make them overthink the situation or react in a way that will give you an advantage somewhere else on the map. So sometimes just being bold, like putting everything in A6 and say, hey, here we are, Germany might freak out and just crash everything into Germany and let you just land in France for free. You never know. That's always, you don't know what your opponent's going to do. But by stacking the A6 zone or stacking A16 or stacking A3, well, you're definitely going to get a reaction from Germany, and maybe it's a good idea to just sit there and see how they react and then take advantage of the situation based on how they move their troops, how What do? How do they respond to you? Don't assume that Germany or Italy is going to do what they think they're going to do. They might do something completely different. So always keep your options open, okay? So that's basically Rainbow 5. And that's exactly what the United States did in the real war. And we can do that very easily in War Room. The way the United States is set up on the board and how everything is laid out, it's very simple for the U.S. to follow the traditional Rainbow 5 battle plan that they did in the real war. And quite frankly, it's very difficult for the Axis to stop you. And sometimes we might, we get tricked up. We start going, well, that I don't like doing the traditional stuff. I want to do non-traditional, like I want to bring all the Americans up into Russia. I'm not saying that's a bad move. What I am saying, though, is if you commit the United States to this defense of Russia plan, you basically let Germany off the hook over here. The United States can tie down way more units by stacking A6 than sending them up into here, because then the Germans will just form up with the other Germans, and basically you're back to the Russian front scenario where it's just your big stacks against their big stacks. They get reinforcements here, your reinforcements are here. You don't want to get into this whole, well, yeah, I got 2 8 stacks, and then after a big battle, you got a stack of 2 guys left. Because those 14 guys are going to take like 4 turns to get back up to the front. It's a very bad situation for the United States. So that's how I'm going to leave it, guys, on Rainbow 5. And let you guys kind of think about it. Think about different like jump points where once we get this consolidated, where do I go? I've talked about it now too many times. You basically got 3 paths. And whichever path the US goes, the UK goes a different path. The only time the UK and the United States actually tag team, like form up huge attacks together, is when you're going into Germany or you're going into France. If you're attacking the periphery, have the US and the UK be separate. Let them each do their own little battle plan, okay? And then we're going to leave it off, though, is that while you're doing all these things, if over those turns you consolidate your power, okay, like bringing back the 4th, saving these ships, okay? Now you're giving the Japanese some free rein here, but that's not our concern right now. What our concern is, conserve all our strength, rally up all our planes, our land units that we can muster, and then you literally start doing this turn, I can do 4 commands on the Pacific map. You jump forward 1 zone to like right here, like this is the 1st zone. There's the 2nd, there's the 3rd, there's the 4th. Ideally you want to be jumping closer to them every turn and putting the pressure on them, okay? Yeah, if you're doing Rainbow 5 over here, and on turn 2, you get all hell-bent, and you have all your Navy here in P10, and let's just say the Japanese are in P19, and you send them all in for this big decisive battle, and you come up short, and you lose all your Navy, that not only hinders you on the Pacific map, but it hinders you over here, because now you have to focus a lot of naval production over here to replace what you lost. So you have to be conservative and a little bit defensive over here, and don't get your blood up and think, oh, well, we'll just go crashing in Japan, and in one foul swoop, we'll knock them out of the war. It ain't going to happen, okay? Wait till you get Germany on the ropes, then you start putting the pressure on Japan, okay? So that's Rainbow 5 for you guys. So I think I laid out a good foundation, some historical, the two historical battle plans, and how we can do that in War Room. And so the foundation is laid. You kind of know what I'm thinking on both battle plans. And then obviously you make your own adjustments. You make your own moves on the fly. And hopefully this helps you out with being better at playing the United States. So I'll be back next video. We'll do the Imperial Japan's Kantai Kessen Decisive Battle Doctrine. Talk to you guys later. Bye.